Okay, let me start off with a little warm up question here. Ashley, were you familiar with Savage Dragon at all prior to this episode?
So working at the comic shop, I, put it in people's pull list every week or every month, but I had never read a single issue until this podcast.
What were your thoughts on seeing the Savage Dragon covers week in and week out? And what was that fan base like? Because I have a feeling that is not even a feeling. I know that is a very dedicated fan base. Like people that love Savage Dragon don't just love Savage Dragon; they live and breathe for that guy, for that character.
Yeah, it was like it's like Spawn. I mean, it was a small fan base, but like super dedicated fan base. Like those guys came in and picked up their books because they really wanted to read Savage Dragon.
Well said. Yeah, I can see that. I found there's that SavageDragon.com website, which was really helpful as far as like research goes. There is a Savage Dragon dedicated podcast called
Fincast?
Savage Fincast, yeah, where they break down a bunch of like I think per issue or every issue. And those types of podcasts are very interesting to me, where they just like very much lean into a very specific niche. It's like, damn, I know for me, I look at it like, how many listeners could they possibly be reaching? But then you think like, well, clearly this book or this character has a dedicated fan base, and maybe it's in the, I'd assume maybe up there in the high thousands. So if you got a dedicated fan base and you have a product or a platform just for them, I had to change my mind. Like, no, that's actually probably pretty fucking lucrative.
So what are we doing? Are we changing formats?
well, I guess my follow-up warm-up question is, if we had to change this podcast to basically be like a niche character podcast or a niche franchise, who would it be? Like, Ashley, if you had to pick just one character to dedicate this whole podcast to going forward, like week in, week out, we're just talking about one character or one title or series, who would that be? Who could you talk about that long?
That's a big question. I would go with Swamp Thing.
I like that.
Just because
a lot of material there.
Like initially I wanted to go with one of like the newer Image books, but I feel like Swamp Thing's got enough history that we could keep it going for a while.
I agree. That's a fantastic pick. Now I've got to
the Swampcast debuting next week, folks. Changing formats.
Swampcast is good.
Swampcast.
That's a good one. That'll be a Patreon bonus. All right, Ed, what about you? Same question.
That's
to you.
not bad.
It's actually too
very
good.
answer.
It's actually the bar is now here. Actually.
Yeah, that's way too.
What are you doing? What do you? We operate around like here. Right, like
here.
Bring
it down.
All right, Ed, if you don't mind, you know what? I'll go ahead and think.
Yeah, let me think about this
because I was thinking maybe of something funny, but now I've got to go, I got to straighten out the tie because I actually threw the gloves down. I would probably try to do something like Daredevil. I think a Daredevil podcast could work. I think there's enough nuance there. He's been around long enough and some of the biggest writers, and he's got such, critically acclaimed runs. I think you could do something with Daredevil. And he's got a TV show, and it's Charlie Cox. There's so many ways we can go. All right, Ed, what about you?
Oh, man, I'm going to, just for the volume of it, I'll probably have to, let me go across the ocean, guys. Let's take a trip.
Oh, come on, man.
Let's go to the land of the rising sun. Let's get Berserk and be a super bummer.
Damn. Oh, that's
Game of Thrones, except way more depressing. And
I'd be really surprised if there isn't already a Berserk podcast, but my manga podcast knowledge is rather low. But that's a great choice. There's enough material there.
Yeah.
A very dedicated fan base.
One guy, that's his one signature work. It's a lot of history, a lot of world building to explore, a lot of, it's still unfinished, so you can even go into where this can go.
Speculation, all that?
Yep.
Damn. Okay, so we just came up with three solid ideas. That
Patreon, vote.
Yeah, that might be better than regular short box. What have we been doing these last 10 years?
Man.
We've been leaving money and followers on the table.
It just took 10 years to figure it out. That's all. Sometimes it takes a while.
It took us 10 years to figure out.
Slow learners.
And now we're all like growing up, having, families and shit like that. All right. Good timing. All right. How about we go ahead and get started with this episode right here? And allow me to go ahead and welcome the short bite. Let me address the listeners, all right? Yo, Short Box Nation. Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 366. And if the title of this episode didn't give it away already, which, I mean, all of our episode titles normally give away the theme we're talking about. But today we'll be talking about Eric Larson's Savage... Ooh, sorry. Today we'll be talking about Eric Larson's Savage Dragon. And that's because we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of Image Comics by talking about one of the 6 original titles that helped form the foundation for one of the largest comic publishers in the industry today. If you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to the Short Box Podcast, aka the official community of the best comic book podcast in the multiverse. My name is Botter, and I'm so happy to be able to say that I'm joined by the rest of the crew today. All right, in the studio for me, sitting to my left is Edmund Danzart. What's up, Ed?
What's up, man?
Calling in on mic number 2 is the most humble published comic book creator you'll ever meet. It's Ashley Laney. Hoy, what up, Ashley?
Hey, doing good.
Ashley, not last episode, but the previous week, the last time me and Ed and Warren were on, I went ahead and did the honors on your behalf, of course, and, announcing to our faithful Short Box Nation, our listeners, that you were expecting, that, you were bringing in a new life into this world. Told them to go ahead and reach out to you. Hopefully you got a lot of love, a lot of messages congratulating you. But I have this idea that I wanted to run by you live on the mic. Ooh. All right. We're always, I don't know if I can say this with a straight face, but we're always talking about, ways to elevate the Patreon, give back to the listeners, and, just give them unique rewards for being such diehard and dedicated, loyal listeners. And I was thinking,
can I guess where we're going?
Yes, you may. Go ahead. What do you think? Where do you think?
Okay, I'm just let them name the child.
Yes,
is that what we're doing?
That's what I was thinking too.
Good sharing, Ashley. They want it. Ashley, they want that privilege.
That's for elite Patreon members.
Yeah. Matter of fact, Ashley, if you want, I'll create a whole new tier that's like $100 a month or however much you want. Right? Yeah. But I think that's a privilege that no other comic book podcast.
We'll set up a poll and everything. You can vote.
I mean, I think they deserve it, honestly.
All right. Well, Short Box Nation, you heard it here first. Patrons, be on the lookout for that poll happening soon.
She's really into. I was expecting more pushback.
I don't know. I think I'm already liking early. I'm already liking early motherhood. Ashley, mm-hmm. Right? She's open to all my crazy ideas. You know what it is? She's not open to the ideas. She's just too tired to fight back. She's like, whatever the fuck you guys want.
Whatever.
Yeah, just roll with it. Just roll with it.
All right, and listeners, you will notice a distinct lack of Cesar. He couldn't join us today, and I'm really surprised. It's not. I know that he's busy raising a newborn, right? He's got a new baby girl. He's a busy dad, and I think it goes to say that if he could have been here, he would have, because we are talking about one of his favorite topics in the whole world. We're talking about 90s comic books today. All right,
Extreme.
If he had a choice, he would be here. He would absolutely be here. So big shout outs to Cesar. We miss you, buddy. And since we're on introductions, I think it's perfect timing to ensure all of our new listeners know a few things before we really get going. For starters, we've got the video version of this podcast up on YouTube. We've been posting a lot more video content on our channel on Wednesdays, so the same day that the podcast drops. So if you like behind-the-scenes stuff or watching your podcast, subscribe to the Short Box Podcast YouTube channel. And if you really want to take your support for the Short Box Nation to the next level, you can join our premier Patreon community to be counted among the Short Box Elite, a.k.a. our favorite fans, all right? Look, we love all of you that tune in week in and week out and support us and follow us and all that. But, I mean, there's no secret. We love our Patreon community, all right? They're our favorite fans. And, honestly, they're dunking on you guys. All you guys that tune in for free, our patrons are dunking on you guys week in, week out. And Ed, I got to ask, I mean, are the listeners, aren't they tired of being dunked on by our patrons?
I would be.
Same, damn it. Same. All right, look. That
when you ask a parent if they have a favorite child, they say, how can you? They have a favorite child. There is a favorite child. Anyone with brothers and sisters will know that.
Absolutely. So our Patreon community is our favorite children. Mm-hmm. That community is near and dear to us, all right, for lack of better terms. Because they help us keep the lights on. They help us pay some podcast bills. They help us keep this thing going. They help us keep it growing. And they help us pick the topics we talk about, today being a prime example. Speaking of patrons, we need to welcome a new member of the community, Ed and Ashley. let's go ahead and give a warm welcome to Brian Tessitori, all right?
Oh, Tessitori.
Hopefully I didn't fuck that up. If I did, Brian, it's part of the charm, all right? You're used to it. Brian is a prime example, right? He's the newest member of our Patreon community. He's a prime example of someone just being tired of being dunked on, all right, by the short box elite, and realized, well, I can't beat the patrons, but I damn sure can join them, and that's what he did. So, Brian, thank you so much for joining our Patreon community. It's a pleasure having you, man. Listeners, if you want those kinds of accolades and privileges, in addition to early access to everything we do, plus bonus shows, become a member of our Patreon community at patreon.com/theshortbox, or click the link in the show notes. As my idol from the Everest commercials used to say, joining our Patreon community is easy.
Why are you making it complicated? It's easy.
All right, so maybe he wasn't talking about these short box Patreon specifically, but my point still stands. It's affordable, and you'll get a bunch of rewards in return, and it means a lot to us. All right, so check it out yourself. Smart business advice aside, let's get on to the main event. Where is my soundbite, man? Oh, there it is. All right, let's get on to the main topic of today's show. Let's get on to the main event and talk about one of Chicago PD's finest and greenest, the Savage Dragon.
We've got things to talk about.
Just like 99% of all of our Comic Spotlight episodes, the main topic of today's show was selected by our Patreon community based on a theme and candidates proposed by our very own Edmund Danzart.
Hey.
Ed, when you came to me with the theme, you mentioned that you wanted to spotlight one of the original 6 comic book series that debuted in 1992 that, formed the foundation of Image Comics. Of Image Comics. My question to you is, did you expect that we'd be talking about Savage Dragon, or that Eric Larson's creation beat out other, extremely well-loved 90s Image Comic series like Rob Liefeld's Youngblood, Todd McFarlane's Spawn, and Jim Lee's Wildcats?
I'm kind of surprised. I'm kind of not, because I think we've covered a lot of those other guys, but I don't think we've talked too much about Eric Larson. So it might be just a thing of, we've done a Todd McFarlane spotlight, we've done a Jim Lee spotlight. Yeah. I would figure, I guess, just process of elimination, it would be, Youngblood or Savage Dragon. But yeah, I'm surprised it won like that handily. He ran away with that.
Savage Dragon won 64% of the votes. Spawn was like a 20%. And poor Jim Lee Wildcats is like, it was so low, even the poll was like, don't worry about it. He ain't winning.
On a participation ribbon. He's in charge of DC.
I'm surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised, is what I'll say. Because to your point, we've probably praised Todd McFarlane and Jim. Hell, they both had, Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane both got a dedicated spotlight. It's one of our best played episodes. Our boy Rob Liefeld, called into the show to congratulate us on our 300th episode. If you haven't heard that already, it is facts. You can go check it out for yourself. Pronounce my name wrong and all that, but it's all good. It's Rob Liefeld. All right, I'm not mad. Ed, do you mind telling us or talking to us briefly about the importance of Image Comics celebrating 30 years? Right, debuted in 1992, still going strong. I think the business model has changed for the better throughout the course of the last 10 years. But talk to us.
It's definitely changed for the better, and it's something that I'm surprised survived, like the speculator crash, and just the way it was done. It was like, this was not supposed to work. You know what I'm saying? It was like, basically on the surface, you look at it, it's like, these are 7 of the top guys in Marvel. You have 3 of the top selling guys in Liefeld, in Lee, and in McFarlane. So, but basically, it's not that they're basically getting good money, because that's how they start this company. But they want more, because they're merchandising the crap out of all their drawings, and they're not seeing a penny of that. So it's not quite the same squabbles that the old school guys had, like a Kirby or those guys, because they're still partaking in the royalty system. The royalty system's in effect, but a lot of it is money based, but a lot of it is creative based too. Like Liefeld wanted to have full control over the characters. If these X-Force characters I made up are making me this much, I want full control. Eric Larson was tired of drawing, other people's stories. He wanted to do his own stuff. And, McFarlane was just kind of, anti-authority as you get. Yep. He was just a disgruntled guy. And, if this wasn't a opportunity to leave Marvel, he would have done it, he would have found another reason too. So it's just the fact that it's just like all these guys came together, starting from this little ad in 1991. The Rob Liefeld was like, I want to do my own little black and white comic. Like, I've always wanted to do that. He had like a love for that. That's why Valentino got in the group, because he was kind of his, mentor. And, Larson, all those guys. And, Liefeld was a young guy, so he's kind of the test. He's kind of the guinea pig for a lot of this. So he puts out this ad of this miniseries he wants to do called The Executioners with an X. He just did X-Force. And the tagline to this is, Rebel mutants from the future came to destroy the past.
Yeah, it's just an homage, right? It's an homage.
And part of me, it's like he did this to see how they would react. So, and basically, that was supposed to come out. It was going to be a limited run, like 1,500 copies, very small run for what he sold. He just sold 3 million copies of X-Force, like that same year. So when he puts that out, Marvel blows a gasket, threatens to sue him if he doesn't cancel this. So that sparks of like, oh, if this is how they're going to react, I must be onto something. So, and then with Larson, Larson was basically looking for, I want to do my own stuff. Because, he has that background of independent publishing. And that's why he was a good guy to have along with this crew. And once they got Todd involved, then Todd made it personal. I think Rob and Eric and a lot of the other guys didn't want to burn the bridge. But Todd, Todd wanted Scorched Earth. He wanted an enemy. He wanted, that's that sports thing. He wanted a adversary, a rival, someone to, shove it in their face. He made things personal. So just on the fact of that, and they got and the big thing, of this group is getting Jim Lee, because Jim Lee was the golden boy at that time. Jim Lee just sold 8 million copies of X-Men.
It wouldn't work without him.
No, because like I said, he had no reason to go. You could say, well, Todd's, an ass, and Rob's a kid. He doesn't know what he's doing. And Eric, he's like a kind of a journeyman guy, and he's just kind of, pouting, because he doesn't feel like he's getting his just due. And like I said, and they got Silvestri, because Silvestri was just about to leave the industry. So they pick him up whilst Portacio comes in. Jim Lee brings him in. So when they get Jim Lee, they get now it's serious. Now this is a big deal, because he had no reason to leave. He had no qualms. He had no beefs with Marvel.
It's almost like if you can get the nice guy in the group, or like the teacher's pet. To join your cause, that's the back. That's maybe the last little backing that you need.
I know Jim Lee is weighing everything. He's very calculated. So I know Jim Lee is thinking, okay, let me do this. Let me prove that I can do the art, and I can run a company. Then I can come back and get a sweet gig at Marvel, a high position at Marvel or DC. So I'm thinking he's planning that from jump. There's no proof of that, but he's building it up, because his between him and Liefeld, they're putting out most of the titles, early Image titles. They had the most titles out of everybody. So I think he was building up his portfolio to sell, to and to get a nice office gig. He's thinking, you can't draw forever. He's playing that game right from Jump Street.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that they come together, a lot of drama. Like I said, Image isn't like one company. Image is a splinter group of everyone has their own studios. So the Image is basically, only thing Image owns is the logo and the name. So you don't really have that camaraderie. You have everybody with their own agendas, but kind of on the same page regarding some things as far as creative control, and not editorial, not getting in each other, staying out of each other's way, and not having anyone tell them what to do or how to do it or to change things. They want to do what they want. So that whole thing doesn't seem like it will work, at the time. It's but it works. They
had enough of star power, and their name held enough weight.
The star power, when they drop these early titles, they're still in 1 million copies, 2 million copies. Eric Larson even said the check he got for the first Savage Dragon paid his house off.
Damn.
So I'm sure that sold. And like I said, Larson wasn't at that top tier, but he was super popular because he's following McFarlane on 2 Spider-Man titles, and that's when he starts getting some traction. So like I said, it's crazy that it worked once you kind of read about how tumultuous it was. They were like stealing people from each other, stealing artists, stealing colorists. They were like raiding each other's talent. Silvestri was going to be part of Jim Lee's studio. He takes like half his guys and moves off to like Santa Monica or something. It's wild. The whole Image story is wild. And the fact that it's survived through, I would say, Valentino and Larson being the publishers, bringing in different people, non-superhero stuff, and basically making it what it is today, like a creator-owned, like a imprint that succeeded where so many have tried and failed, especially like in the 80s, like your First Comics and Eclipse Comics and even like Epic Comics. And and then just another funny thing, like when they were negotiating with Marvel offered them the Epic line, which is like it's like, no, that's garbage. I don't want that. Plus you still had to like 50% goes back to Marvel. So it's like, that's not what we want.
Nope.
So
they were after the whole pie, not just a slice.
Yeah, the fact that it's survived and what it's become, and bringing in new good talent, established talent, that their business model, it's like it's crazy that it's survived over the years. And just looking back on the variety of titles that they've had, it's pretty impressive.
Well said. Speaking about on the topic of Image, Ed, how could we overlook the fact that we have a published comic creator that has worked with Image and
you're part of the Image family?
You're right. Like, come on, man.
What's Todd really like?
Just the dirt, Ashley. Ashley, but in a few words, jokes aside, in a few words, I would like to hear what your thoughts on Image Comics as a publisher and what they mean to independent creators and allowing comic creators to own a piece of the pie.
Well, I know just, as many conventions as I've been to, everybody talks about how they have the best deal in the industry. So that's why all these creators go there with their original stuff, because they know that Image is going to take care of them and not screw them over. And because of that, they've put out, I could say, my favorite comic book titles that I've ever read. I mean, you just have to have a lot of respect for these guys. As much as I'm not really a fan of Spawn and Youngblood and stuff like that, like you just have to have respect for them and like what they've built, and you can just see how they treat creators. And I think that that's why they're going to stand the test of time and
5 of those guys are still there running the company, and Larson is still doing Savage Dragon for the last 30 years. It's wild.
Actually, I got to ask then, what was your feeling and thought? And I think we've talked about this on a separate podcast, but just remind us again, what was your feeling and thoughts seeing the Image icon on the project that you and Sarah Delane and Nicholas how do you say his last name? Afliji.
Afliji.
Seeing the Image icon on Little Girls when it was released, a few years ago.
I mean, I can't even describe it, because when Sarah had the pitch for the book, she was like, okay, well, I'm going to take it to all these companies. I'm really hoping for Image. And then when she called and told me that Image had picked it up, it was like, I don't know, it was like a dream. Yeah. It's my favorite publishing company. So to be able to be a part of a project put out by Image, like it's something that I'm never going to forget. It's like the top of my portfolio and, everything I've ever done. It's kind of like at the top of my list of just like achievements. Yeah,
you made us proud
pretty
that
much.
Day. You made us hella proud. And I'm surprised I haven't just like milked that stone for everything it's worth. that we have an Image Comics published creator on this podcast, right? It's like she doesn't need us, but she still joins every Sunday. Can you believe that? No, that's a great insight. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ashley, and Ed. Thank you for setting the stage. And I'll say, according to that, article that I shared in the group chat, that article had compared what Image had did, especially specifically the original 7 founders, 7, right? 7 founders to other iconic groups and collectives like the Highwaymen and the Olympic Dream Team. And I was like, man, that's really accurate to use like these other kind of pop culture groups to compare like, the OG Image Comics founders. Because to me, like, they elevated the artists to the forefront. Like they were, comics first rock stars, like highly respected and just fucking cool, like the definition of hell. Rob Liefeld had a fucking Gene commercial with Spike Jones, right? Like, and he had a commercial with Spike. Like, come on, like there was no one cooler. Like, especially in comics, like I don't know. To me, they still kind of set the bar for cool factor in comic books. And the best part is like they knew what they brought and they knew their worth, and they set something up to pass along to future generations. Like even to this day, that we're still seeing future generations and comic creators today benefit from. And I think that is like such a cool like that is the definition of legacy. Like talk about having a legacy in comics. Like there is none better than I think Image Comics.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off that, it's a interesting comparison. I don't know if it's 100% accurate, because it's when you look at all 7 of those guys, you can't say it is like the Dream Team, because they're not all Hall of Famers. They're all really good, but you could say there's 3 or 4. Like Wiles Portacio had to kind of back out because of some family issues, so he's still credited as a founder, but he was kind of off to the, he had other things he had to deal with in his life. But having someone like Jim Valentino, who's like 10 years older than these guys, you have like a veteran, bringing in a veteran. Like, he was never like a top tier artist or writer, but he put the work in, and he had the knowledge of printing, outside of the big companies, independent printing, independent publishing, which they needed that knowledge because they're going blind into this, essentially. Because the first year they work with Malibu Comics, who had the infrastructure to kind of support them, and then they dipped out after a year with them. But Valentino was, I think, Liefeld's pick because he was kind of like a mentor to him. And I think I think McFarlane had that. He kind of thought that philosophy of like, this is supposed to be the Dream Team, and he didn't want him on there. So he's like, this guy's not on our level.
Yeah, get this old guy out of here.
Yeah, so he's not on our level. And they're basically like, look, this isn't for just who's popular. This is for everybody. Yeah. So it kind of like, set those rules right off the bat too.
I'll give you that. And I agree. I guess, you look at like Valentino and so even I feel like Silvestri deserves way more credit than what I'm about to give, but they were kind of like the Chris Mullen and Christian Latner of the Dream Team.
That's fair.
So, in saying that, not saying disrespectfully at all, but I say that to say that they might not have been as big as Lee or McFarlane, but everyone played like their role. They all had a role, and they were really good at what they brought.
Yeah.
So thank you, Ed, for setting that up. Let's go ahead and dive, get a little more granular and talk about today's main topic, which is Savage Dragon. The homework assignment for this episode was to read the first couple of issues of Savage Dragon, which is essentially collected in the easy-to-find Savage Dragon Volume 1, Baptism of Fire. I think it's like $13 on Amazon. I'm sure I would be surprised if there was not a comic shop in the U.S. that doesn't have, those first couple issues of Savage Dragon. Ed's holding up the trade paperback for those of you watching on video.
Yeah, the weird thing about the Baptisms of Fire, it is kind of a recut of the originals.
That's right. It is not page for page. It's not a reprint of issue 1, 2, and 3. I understand that like it's some of the pages are moved around to tell a more cohesive story.
Yeah, it's more cohesive. He doesn't start and then flash back. He kind of does it in almost timeline order to make it, I guess, easier to understand. Because just back to back, because I was reading it, and then I still have my originals from when I was a kid.
Smells like the 90s. Smells like Teen Spirit over here.
And I was like, wait a minute, I don't remember. Why is this here? I don't remember the first page being this. Yeah. So I like them both ways of storytelling for different reasons, but I think this as a book is more cohesive. But comic to comic, I like the original.
Good stuff. All right, so the solicitation for the first volume of Savage Dragon, just kind of setting up the groundwork for any listeners that haven't read it in a while or aren't familiar, but the solicitation reads something like this: Chicago, period. A criminal mastermind called Overlord held the city in his terrifying grip. Ordinary cops were losing the battle against Overlord and his super freaks. Then a miracle happened.
Freaky.
Yeah. Then a miracle happened. When he was found, he had no memory of his past. Lieutenant Frank Darling helped him find an identity and a life. Now they have a fighting chance. Now they have the dragon. Savage Dragon, for those of you unaware, he is near invincible. He's got a healing factor. He's extremely strong, and he's got amnesia. All right, they kind of definitely lean in on that aspect of him. Not knowing where he's from, why he's a dragon, why he landed on Earth. I don't think readers actually didn't learn the dragon's true origin until almost 13 years later, in like 2005, when Eric Larson he actually told the story of Savage Dragon being an emperor for an alien planet that was set on conquering Earth, but his plans got foiled by some scientists that basically gave him amnesia and planted false memories in his mind. I think the dragon's real name is like Kurr, or Kurr or something like that. The theme and topics in these first few issues deal with the police as an institution, superpowered beings, crime, and racism. Was there any other themes or major topics that you guys noted?
Not really, because it is like your serious like 90s action movie. Well, I mean, it's not an Alan Moore book. It's not a lot of deep things. There's some little tropes where like the old style of superhero to the new superheroes, like the super patriot, and you kind of get like a little bit of that Watchmen where the Mighty Man, the Shazam type character in the book, basically they found out his secret identity and killed him because he's old. Now he still can be Shazam and young, but he's in real life he's old. And then the fact that they redid the Patriot as like a Captain America guy to like a kind of like a RoboCop, robot thing. So there's kind of that old style superheroes to like the modern
at cutting, extreme.
Extreme was taken, so Savage works.
Yeah. I think one of the best descriptions of Savage Dragon that I it's not my own, but I love it so much I'll use it here. But I read somewhere online it described as the John McClane of comic books, like Die Hard in comic book form with a fucking green dragon, a green dude with a fin.
Yeah,
which I love and I think is accurate. Ashley, how did how many issues did you read, and then how did it sit with you? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Give us your thoughts.
I agree with you guys. Like I was gonna say,
well said. Yes,
it's like a Michael Bay movie. Like everything strong about it is in the visuals. I made the mistake of reading. I didn't read the first issue. I read that sort of prequel.
Oh, okay, cool.
With his origin. Yeah, and I was just like shaking my head. But at the same time, like you just have to remind yourself, like, not everything is meant for me. So I read that one and then the first two issues, and
you were like, enough.
It's just so 90s. Like, I don't know how else to describe it.
This is clearly not the Image comics 90s. Of today, where it's like, very kind of like nuanced. It's, different genres. This is like superhero comic books at its height.
The thing, too, is like not everything has to be that. Fair enough. This is like, sometimes you just want to watch, like for me, it's like, look at Top Gun making $1 jillion. Who would have thought? Because people like that simple. We know who the good guys are. We know who the bad guys are. The story is simple. We understand it. And just because it's a simple, easy to follow story doesn't mean it's bad. It means it works. And this thing will always work. This formula will always work. And there's the high-minded. You can read Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore, and that's great. But this is like a kid got the opportunity to make a comic, and he's doing it. And you can see some of the Kirby influences. You can even see some manga influences to these guys. You see these guys starting to like look at the Japanese stuff with all those crazy action lines and things like that. You can see him experimenting, with inking and things like that. So I agree. And like I said, I'm not saying you have to like this. It is not for everybody. But as far as just a simple, fun, like the kid in me when I was reading this, I love the fuck out of this, because this is like perfect. It's like the first page, guy's getting punched in the face. The second page, 2-page spread, punch in the face. It's like, yeah, this is awesome. This guy looks cool. He's all jacked and awesome. And there's, it's like there's like babes in it. There's like fighting.
It is everything a teenage boy would want.
It is
for sure.
For me at the age when this came out, this was the best.
For sure. And I'll echo what's being shared so far. It's not from my perspective, it's not complex, it's not really that nuanced, but it is a spectacle to look at, and I think it meets the bar that was set among the other titles at that time, right? Like, when you look at his peers coming out from Image at the time, I think I'll even say it's maybe even more unique than some of the other ones, in the sense that, like, you could draw parallels to the other titles, like to the Image titles, to already established titles like Spawn. I think you could draw a lot of parallels to like Batman or like Spider-Man and Venom, and then Youngblood to X-Men and things like that. But I think Larson with Savage Dragon gave us something like really unique and original.
Well, his out of all those books, I think was more fun. It was like a sense of fun about it, because this was the, post Dark Knight. Everyone's grimacing and assholes and brooding and shitty, and this is fun. I mean, there's some like brooding and stuff in there, but there's like a lot of action. Mm-hmm. You can see his love of the dynamic poses that Kirby has done, and this is kind of like this. I interpret this as Eric Larson's, like, this is the comic I would have liked when I was a kid, and I'm drawing this comic. And the fact that he's done this comic and was able to continue to do this comic is pretty incredible.
I think that's more true than you think, considering that one of the surprising things I learned was that this was a childhood. Savage Dragon was a childhood idea for Eric Larson. Like, he had this thought since he was, I think, 9 or something, like a very young kid, and it went through so many changes, and and you could tell, like, he's still. This was like a dream opportunity for him to take like this childhood idea and put it into comic book form, and that's the kind of vibe I get from Eric Larson, that this is just a lot of fun for him.
Yeah. Did you want to hear the first version of Savage Dragon?
Oh, hit it! Come on. We're
okay. So the first version of Savage Dragon, he drove the Mach 5 like Speed Racer. Oh. So he created this, and when he was 19, he created a little self-published black and white fanzine comic called Graphic Fantasy with like 3 or 4 of his characters.
If I may interject right here, I was curious if you could buy that on eBay.
It's $1 billion.
So I had to guess. Actually, I'll aim towards you, because it sounds like Ed might have did the same research. If you had to guess how much Graphic Fantasy issues 1 and 2, which is the comic zine that Eric Larson created with some friends that first truly like introduced, or the first appearance of Savage Dragon, a much earlier form than what we read in this Image comic series. How much would you estimate these 2 books go for on eBay? And I'll give you a couple more hints, all right? There's only one listing for these 2 books. Only one listing, and you got to keep in mind it was essentially a comic zine, so 1981, 82. So extremely low print run. What would be your best guess as to how much these books go for right now on eBay? Not bad. That's actually a guess. A little north of what it is. It is, for these 2 books, you can get them for $30,000. There's a listing right now, just basically $30,000.
But there's a Russian website where you can read it if you're that curious.
Well, they actually came out. They re-released it in I think 2021 or 2022. They made a facsimile edition, so you can read it legally.
That's the one that's on the Russian site. Because I looked at that year, I'm like 2021. Yeah. Oh, that's right. They reprinted this.
Yeah, but sorry. Ed, as you were saying, it sounded like he went through a couple different variations.
And he said a magic word like Shazam, because he was a big Shazam Captain Marvel fan.
So it was basically like anything Eric Larson was into at the time.
Speed Racer and Shazam. The 2 S's.
Yeah, I can feel it. What I'll say about these, and I want to hear more about Eric Larson, but I wanted to finish off by saying my thoughts in regards to these initial issues. I can tell that, he tries to bring up like some themes of like racism and crime. I think the word super freaks is kind of used in a derogatory sense. There's that one cop on the police force that's very clearly racist.
Yeah. The corrupt cop.
Yeah.
Who's like 3 feet taller than Savage Dragon for some reason. It's like, how big is this guy?
So
Holy
like,
shit.
I can tell that in these initial issues that Eric Larson wants to introduce these themes, and considering that that Savage Dragon is still going on, it's up to issue 265. I'm confident that he's really had time to dive into these themes and flesh them out. But in these initial 3 issues, to me those themes are like very shallow. They're just kind of thrown into like cross a box or X a box. There's not a lot to look into. It's kind of like shallow, and I think maybe that's the, aside from that, I think the charm is in the simplicity, like Ed, you were bringing up. Like, it's very black and white. Like, Savage Dragon's sense of justice is either it's good or it's evil. He joined the police force. Like, this symbology of proposed like the good of the good, right?
And the first guy that he beats up, the Rick James looking dude,
Cutthroat, isn't it? Cutthroat, yeah.
With skull shoulder pads, skull like codpiece, skull knee pads. I think just like skull
and eye patch. Don't forget that eye patch.
Deep, eye patch. Man, that is, if you could just like draw a '90s villain, you would draw this dude.
Yeah. So, but I wanted to share this quote from Eric Larson that I think encapsulates what we're saying as far as it being a fun book, maybe not a very deep book. But according to Eric Larson, the series is aimed at, quote, older Marvel readers who are about ready to throw in the towel on comics altogether. It's the missing link between Marvel and Vertigo. More mature than Marvel, but less pretentious than Vertigo. The kind of comics that he wants to read. This book is really self-indulgent, end quote. So, Ed, you're bringing up his influences and things like that, and it's coming from the man himself, that he is drawing and writing the comic books that he wants to read. I think there's something kind of charming about that.
And these are artists, not writers specifically. And like I said, a lot of artists who are, self-proclaimed didn't do a lot of reading themselves. So expecting them to come with like a Shakespearean story, you're asking a lot. And the thing at the time was, it was the... And to a point, visuals, I think, sell the comic, and then the story is like the cherry on the sundae. Yeah, 'cause I have a lot of pretty comics with dog shit stories in my collection, and I just don't think that was the whole attitude of these guys. There's like that punk rock attitude. It's like, don't tell me what to do. I'll do what I want. It's like, it's like they're kind of anti-authority, anti-establishment almost stance, but there's systems in place for reasons, and like, so when you don't have someone to kind of rein these wild personalities, these like super aggressive, super like macho dudes, 90s extreme dudes, if you don't have someone to rein those in, this is what you get, for better, for worse.
This is where the role of an editor, it just shines. It's like, this is what happens.
And if they're hiring the editor's gonna say, "It looks great. Yeah, looks great, Eric. Looks great, Todd.
When am I
never better?
When's my $2 million check coming in again?
Please?
Oh no, it looks great. Looks great.
Perfect.
Ashley, I love getting your opinion from artistic standpoint. Being the published comic artist. So, Ashley, from just purely art standpoint, what did you think about Eric Larson's artwork? Because he is credited as penciler, inker, and I'm not sure about the colorist. I think someone else colored some of those. But overall, he did everything. Thoughts on Eric Larson's artwork?
I mean, considering what it is, I have no complaints because it's so dynamic and it fits the story perfectly. I mean, you're right. Like, he is an artist. He's not a writer. Yeah. The art is like the absolute star of the show here. And there are certain panels like what is the name of that chick that just showed up at like police headquarters?
Brunette?
In like the first or second issue.
Oh.
Yes. No. Like the superhero one that was just like, I'm here to help.
All right, Ashley, continue. We'll get that name for you, Ashley.
I'm trying to remember who was in that.
Okay. But when she showed up, I was like, oh my God, like she's so 90s. And then it just, it sounds weird, but just the way that he renders
explain.
butts.
Please explain.
Like, do you guys notice that? Like they're just so...
Yeah,
like,
man.
yeah, like everybody's
The
just
90s.
wearing tight pants. And I don't know how he does it.
Gratuitous
but
butt
it's
shots
just,
all around, baby.
It's
Yeah.
so nice.
No, Savage Dragon's got
and
it pretty
you just
nice.
gotta enjoy it for what
Ham
it
hocks
is.
back there.
Yes. And he's just... Yeah. No, it's like a Michael Bay movie, honest to God. And like, he's just so... I like that Eric Larson is so self-aware. I give him a lot of credit for just being
superhero that
so
shows up at
self-aware.
the police station, but I'm having a hard time finding it in these first issues.
You said it was in the second issue?
You know what's funny is I read about 3 issues. I could have read the wrong issues, but
Well said.
I don't think it matters.
What I think,
really don't.
Ed, I liked what you brought up as far as the action lines, because I think Eric Larson has a good sense of like movement and drawing action. One of my favorite pages is from issue 1. It's a double-page spread of him fighting, of his first encounter with any of the other super freaks. It's when he fights the Rick James, looking super villain Cutthroat. But there's a 2-page spread where I think he just kind of busts through the wall and he's giving him like just a fucking punch right through the jaw. It's enormous. Like the figures are huge. Yeah, if you don't mind.
That's the second page in the how the comic's laid out. That's the second page in the comic. That's a 2-page spread.
Wow, damn, that trade really moves things around there.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Do you mind holding that up, that spread up to the camera? All right. So for video listeners, viewers, you can go ahead and take a look. But this 2-page spread is epic, man. Like he uses every single inch of space that he's got. The figures are huge. I mean, hell, Savage Dragon's muscles are like the size of, just like take up half the page. But just like his sense of movement, his sense of action, and the detail that he gives to the surrounding, right? Like, I think he just loves drawing like broken doors and boxes and shit.
Debris.
Yeah, he loves drawing some debris. I think an issue. Well, now I'm kind of confused, but when he goes into these sewers to confront Arachnid.
That's a great 2-page.
That's really good Nat sound, by the way, for a comic book podcast. Just some putting in a comic book in the back and forth. But in issue 2, he goes into the sewers to fight. I would assume clearly kind of a Spider-Man ripoff. Or
1,000%.
You're right, like Arachnid. It shoots webbings. It talks in third person, or it's got quips. But when he goes into the sewer, and yet again another double-page spread.
Second page in this book is another double-page spread.
I think it's like the image formula, though. At least at this time, right? It's like, look, hey, double, splash pages sell, double page spreads sell, big. But when he goes into the sewer, and
so awesome.
You see the monster Arachnid, and then you see like the kids all webbed up, like the missing kids all webbed up. Something about like the setting, like you kind of feel like you're in this like really creepy, wet, nasty ass.
Well, it's
sewer.
a good job with this. This is early, digital colors too, so you do feel like you're trapped in the sewer with this freak. Look at those weird little arms too. How awesome is that?
Yeah. So aside from being like a solid figure drawer, and aside from being able to draw solid figures, giving like his characters mass and weight, I think his attention to detail for setting and debris really adds to how big the fights are and things like that. Ed, if you don't mind actually talking to us a little more about Eric Larson in regards to his high level career, because we're spending a lot of time talking about Savage Dragon. I think it's safe to say that is his magnum opus. But prior to getting the opportunity to help form Image Comics, he did have I don't know if it was rather long, but I'm assuming like a pretty decent sized career at Marvel Comics, right?
Yeah, like I said, we can even say like that graphic fantasy. He publishes at 19, and he's kind of off the he's hitting the road. He's off. He's basically doing independent stuff. Mm-hmm. He's doing a lot of fill-in work. He's kind of like a journeyman, a long part of his career. He got into comics because his dad had his comic collection. So his dad actually had old EC comics, old Wiz comics with the with Shazam and like I said, or Captain Marvel, the original Captain Marvel. And it's funny listening to him in interviews. He's like, "Oh, you mean Shazam?" It's like, "No, I mean Captain Marvel. He's always been Captain Marvel. All the stuff I read is Captain Marvel.
Everything.
Shazam's the word he says. That's stupid. Why would he be named Shazam? He's Captain Marvel."
On the website, it kept referencing Captain Marvel. I was like, he looks nothing like Marvel or
Yeah,
anyone
when
else.
I heard an interview, I
But
was like,
Shazam
Captain
makes
Marvel.
sense.
But he's a huge Shazam. Even like the Mighty Man is like a Shazam kind of clone in the Savage Dragon universe. But like I said, he did a lot of work with like I said, that kind of inspired him to do this. And like I said, he's done stuff for Eclipse. He's worked for DC. He's worked for Marvel. He did a year run on Doom Patrol. Like I said, he became he kind of got in good with Jim Shooter from just all the submissions he was doing. And they met at a convention, and they both kind of co-plotted like a little Thor Hulk fight scene. So that got kind of his foot in the door at Marvel. And I think, like I said, he got a little bit of a run on Punisher, did some stuff with Excalibur, but he was just, like I said, he was kind of the fill-in guy, for the most part. But then I think where he started becoming a more recognized name or more popular name was once he took over Amazing Spider-Man with when Todd left the title. And then, like I said, that's when he started, becoming, popular, because that's a good, if you're going to transition artists, that's a pretty good complementary artist to have with Todd's style.
Yeah.
Because they both kind of have like a dynamic and cartoony-ish, cartoony kind of Michael Golden, Art Adams-ish style. And like I said, and this is, he's enjoying it, but he's still wanting to do his own stories, So that's, like I said, when this kind of image idea starts taking shape, he was on board, for day one. But then, and I think, Todd had respect for him because, he followed his, when he left.
Dude, he was sandwiched between, the follow-up after McFarlane.
Yeah.
Who his run is like, and held in high regard among Spidey fans. I don't know if any of those sold any of the millions. I think it's when Todd McFarlane got his own run.
Even before, even that second title, the Adjectiveless Spider-Man, he took over for him after
Which
Todd
I did
had
not
his,
know.
Todd had his kind of falling out, and he kind of took a sabbatical from Marvel. So he took over, twice for Todd, and I think Todd probably handpicked him at that point. Yeah,
and that's where I was introduced to Eric Larson when I was like, getting my first like collection up and running. I was really into like those 1990 Amazing Spider-Mans, like around like the 320 range. But particularly like Mark Bagley was like my guy.
Yeah.
So I was trying to find all those issues, and anytime I'd find, like, admittedly, I just wasn't a big fan of Eric Larson because I would just compare him to Mark Bagley.
Yeah.
Of course, as I got older and really started appreciating Eric Larson's artwork, those I got to give him props, man. Like to be sandwiched to follow up after McFarlane and really kind of be sandwiched between two very iconic Spider-Man artists. I don't think his name gets brought up enough, especially when you consider that he did damn good work on it. And some of his like artwork has graced like some of the more iconic Spider-Man runs from the 90s. Maybe not iconic, but definitely fun ones. Like he's the one that drew the second return of Venom after that initial appearance that McFarlane introduced.
He came down with the monster features with the crazy teeth and tongue and
he
stuff.
did Return of the Sinister Six, a Cosmic Spider-Man.
That Doc
and
Ock
all
is
that.
sweet. His white suit Doc Ock.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool version of Dr. Octopus.
Yeah. So it's to me, I feel like his career is rather streamlined. We've seen that story kind of before of like self-publishing to get the attention of the majors, hopping on the majors, using the majors to kind of springboard into your own career. I was really, like I said, surprised at how long the Dragon idea had been around, how many changes it had undergone before, becoming, solidified, and becoming the Dragon that we know. To this date, Eric Larson and Savage Dragon, that is the longest running full color comic book to feature a single artist and writer, meaning that this guy has written and drawn, to get, every single issue of Savage Dragon since it premiered in 1992. I think he might have missed one issue, but most people kind of like forgive it because it's like, it's
I think they did an issue where everybody switched titles.
Oh.
And Jim Lee drew an issue.
Okay, maybe that was it. But and then I know we've talked about, since on the topic of Image, and we've talked about this before, I think during the Todd McFarlane Spotlight, I always get confused like Savage Dragon and Spawn. because they kind of hold similar records. But Spawn is, that has been published over 300 issues. So that's got Savage Dragon beat by a couple of issues. And that is the longest running creator-owned comic book in history, which is impressive in its own right. But when you consider that, Todd McFarlane hasn't drawn Spawn
exactly.
in
There's
years.
a lot more hands involved with Spawn.
He's got a team. Eric Larson's like...
Yeah, it's him.
Yeah, I do this at the coffee table.
He does it, him, and he's got like a couple of the guys that he's been working with. I think he brought them over from Marvel, like his colorist and letterer and other people. But yeah, he's been running the show. And like I said, 2004, 2008, he was the publisher. So he's basically, I guess, essentially in charge of what titles are coming out. And so like underneath, his tenure, had one of the coolest things that Image does is that $9.99 first volume trade, which started under his his tenure, and that was like Walking Dead was like the first trade to do that. So, but
that's cool.
A lot of titles do that, and that was like a really smart move because Image is always like in the trades at the end of the year. They're like the top list. May not be individual issues, but they sell a ton of trade paperbacks.
I mean, actually, you can attest to that. Like that business model of pricing your first trade to $10. I mean, how many customers and new readers have you gone into? How many times have you used that to your advantage to get new readers on board for books and new titles?
Oh, I mean, they know what they're doing. Like, I've used that countless times because it's like you get them hooked with that $9.99 trade, and then they either start getting the issues or they come back for more trades. Like that $9.99 Saga trade. Like I don't know how many times.
What Ashley's saying is that
literally,
she needed a commission.
we would just reorder them.
She was selling so many editions. All right,
and like just another couple key things. It's like Rick Remender's first Image work is under his tenure. So Fear Agent, which is really good, and then Robert Kirkman becomes a partner during his role as publisher, and he's like the first. Well, he's the youngest, and he's the first non-artist member to be actually part of the actually one of the partners, and he's like vice president or something like that. And now Eric Larson is like the CFO, chief financial officer for Image. So he's an office guy, but he's still producing work. But I'm not sure exactly how much CFOing and CEOing those guys are doing, but he's got an office gig.
Sounds good on the resume. But thank you for sharing that. I wasn't familiar with Eric Larson's publisher time and his accomplishments.
Yeah,
so
and he
cool.
took over for Valentino, who was like the 4 years before him, and Valentino brought in a lot of like more independent non-superhero comics, and I don't think he did a bad job, but I think Eric Larson kind of like streamlined, kind of got a lot of the fluff out and kind of streamlined like more quality titles. So that both of those guys as publishers did a lot of basically helped Image evolve into what it is now.
I need to take a page out of their book, and like what I should have done throughout the course of 10 years of Short Box Podcast is like every 3 years just switch host. So Ashley would have done like 3-4 years just to see what she would have done. Ed for 2.
Why do I get 2? I actually get 3.
I mean, come on, let's be real. The published comic book artist would definitely get a little
an extra year for that. That's fine. That's fine.
I'd be curious what came out of that. All right, I got one more question on the topic. I'm sorry, I got one more topic in question talking about Savage Dragon. Ashley, I'll look to you for this one, all right? I always love hearing your casting and thoughts on this one. But Savage Dragon, as we know, got an animated series treatment back in 1995 on the USA Network. Kind of hazy memory for me. I don't remember too many of those episodes, or if it was impactful to me as a kid, probably not. But it ran for 2 seasons for 25 episodes. Eric Larson himself has described it as, quote, not awesome, not awful, and more meh, end quote.
That's fair.
So I doubt, considering that even the creator is kind of like,
it's not going to be on the pilot's license anytime soon.
Actually, the current poll for the record, I don't think anyone voted for Savage Dragon. For the record.
It was on. It made the poll.
No.
Yeah,
they should appreciate it making the poll. That should be a.
Yeah, I'll tell you guys a little more about that. But
that's hilarious.
Knowing that even Eric Larson himself is kind of about the animated series, I doubt there's any chance of an animated series coming back, even though I think it would work really well as an animated series. I don't know about watching that.
He said, I just listened to an interview with him. He said that he'd be interested because of how well Invincible did.
I figured that was
he said he would do it if he could, like, not be 100% hands-on, but kind of consult. And he has to do it with, he has to trust whoever is taking that and, like, basically rights and all that stuff. You know, he's not going to, like, you know, basically give those rights up to anybody. So he's got to keep his rights and kind of keep a consulting part on it. So I'm surprised, like, Kirkman's studio might look into doing that. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, Skybound, because everyone has their own little separate studios. So, but yeah.
All right, Ashley, my question, and help us kick us off with this one: if Savage Dragon got greenlit for a live action movie, who would you want directing or starring in it?
Okay, so I was thinking about this. One of my favorite movies that I have seen,
God, I love that movie.
Probably 100 times, is The Other Guys. So Mark Wahlberg as the dragon.
Damn. So you basically want the same thing I want, which is a
like
Other Guys sequel. And you might as well. Yeah. I like that. That's good.
Hilarious.
Once again, Ashley, you set.
Oh my God.
You set the bar.
Yeah.
You set the bar. Okay. I'll follow up with that, and then Ed, I want to hear yours. I think the only person that could realistically portray Savage Dragon of all these veiny, big ass muscles would probably be Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I feel like if there was ever a superhero that he should have played, in addition to Black Adam, I think he looks great as Black Adam, but he could easily be Dwayne the Rock. He could easily be the Dragon. He could easily be Savage Dragon. Just put a fucking skin tight. I mean, anything you put on him would be skin tight, but put a cop uniform on him and a green fin. And as far as directors go, I would want either Phil Lord, because he directed 21 Jump Street. And I think one thing I didn't get a chance to talk about was Savage Dragon is also, it's like kind of dry humor. It's not like overtly funny, because I think there's a serious tone to it with like the whole police force aspect, Chicago, the super freaks, crime and all that. But to me, it's a little, it's not like, it doesn't take itself seriously, Ed, like you were saying, where, Spawn and Youngblood are extreme, they're edgy, they're, grimdark. To me, Savage Dragon's just kind of like, he's kind of a, he knows pop culture. He's spouting off pop culture topics. Like, he's not that
selective amnesia.
Yeah,
he knows how to go to the bathroom and shoot a gun and stuff.
Yeah. Like,
he just doesn't know who he is.
He's not such like a gray hero, right? Like, he's a good guy and he's got a heart. I think having a director that could bring out that heart and that kind of like underlying comedy aspect of it, or just it being fun, I think Phil Lord and bringing that 21 Jump Street vibe could do really well. Or I also had Paul, how do you say his name? Verhoeven, the director from RoboCop.
Oh, that's what I was going to
just pick. A word?
Yeah.
I had great minds think alike.
Yeah, man.
Hopefully I didn't steal your thunder. What were your picks?
I'm thinking this is going to be CGI nightmare. This is not going to be a real person. And I want to get Keith David as his voice.
Man.
Because I want him in everything. And they can just make a weird CGI green horrible thing.
It won't matter. It won't matter what it looks like because you got Keith David's voice.
Yeah, and I'd love to have that kind of that grittiness of RoboCop and with more of the little satire of the kind of 90s satire and just kind of making fun of that era and just kind of having him almost like an aloof guy in this ultra-violent world. And I think, Paul Verhoeven and Keith David for sure.
Well said. Good picks. All right, let's wrap this segment up, this topic up, with some recommendations. If someone is listening and we've piqued their interest in regard to Savage Dragon and they want to know where else they should go in relation to Savage Dragon, or maybe just Image Comics in general, where would we take them? Actually, maybe you can take, and I know that is a loaded, very vast question. So here's how I want to do it. Ed, I want you to give a Savage Dragon recommendation because it sounds like you are a resident Savage Dragon expert.
Can I give an Eric Larson recommendation?
Take it away.
Okay.
Take it.
I will recommend 1999. He did a 12-issue run of the Defenders, of the classic Defenders, like Hulk, Namor, Hellcat, Nighthawk. Amazing. This is probably some of his best art. And like I said, it's super funny, super silly. Namor and Hulk fight all the time. Silver Surfer's in it. Basically, the premise of the series is like they defeat this wizard, and they basically the wizard puts a curse on them to where they're always bonded. So anytime they're needed, they basically teleport and have to take care of whatever danger is going on. So like there's a funny like running joke where Namor is fighting what's the blue guy's name that he fights all the time? Attila?
Atuma?
Yeah. Atuma. They're fighting, and he gets teleported back with everybody else so they can fight somebody, and then he has to rush back to Atlantis and fight off Atuma, and then he disappears again. It's a very fun series. I don't know if they've collected it. I have probably the first dozen or so. I got at least his run of it. So, yeah, Eric Larson's Defenders is incredible stuff.
All right, I like that's a good recommendation. That's unique. Ashley, in regards to, give us an image recommendation. What's one of your favorite image? I know that is also a loaded question because you could probably go on and on and on. But give us a recommendation from Image that would kind of fit someone, the Savage Dragon.
You can't use your book.
Yeah, you can't plug yourself. So if someone read Savage Dragon, they want to read some more, high action and, superhero kind of stuff from Image, where would you take them?
Man, that is hard because this is so different from anything that I read.
Oh, come on, that was easy.
But I would say if you really like this,
that was a damn good
like
that is a
Luther
great
Strode.
one.
Now, I know I said that you weren't allowed to shamelessly plug your book, but I will shamelessly plug our episode of Justin Jordan, the writer of Luther Strode.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show as well. Me and Cesar interviewed him, I think 2 years ago or something like that. But that episode of interview was fantastic. And Ashley's recommendation for Luther Strode is a damn good follow-up.
It's good.
What I'll recommend, kind of sticking to the theme of Image, is a documentary, the Image Revolution documentary from 2014. It shows the original 7 founders of Image Comics as rock stars making history. So they, tell all the secrets, all the behind-the-scenes stuff, and share the story of them getting together and forming Image from their perspective. Highly recommend it. I think we've championed. Man, we've been recording long enough to where I can say we talked about it when it first came out, and that came out in 2014. So Image Revolution, I think it's on Amazon Prime, pretty readily available. So, anyways, I think we've captured what needs to be said about Eric Larson's, magnum opus, The Savage Dragon, and how he helped change the comic industry for the better for all comic creators. So I'd like to move into our next topic and take a look at the future of comics and what's hitting shops next month. Shortbox Nation, it's time to grab yourself a fistful of comics for this next segment. Oh, where is that? Oh, here we
go. You can either have a mouthful of teeth or a fistful of comics.
Cesar, not here, but always here in spirit. Fistful of Comics is the part of the show dedicated to all you Wednesday warriors who loyally frequent your local comic shops every week, as well as newbies looking for a little help and direction on how to spend your hard-earned cash on only the best titles the industry has to offer. This segment is brought to you by Ben Kingsbury, owner of Gotham City Limit, Jacksonville's premier shop for comics, toys, collectibles, and more. Now, if you're new to the show, every week, Ben, a.k.a. the ultimate comic salesman, you won't find anyone better at selling comic books or talking about comic books or pitching comic books or any of that stuff. All right, he is the best at what he does. But he calls in, every week he calls in with a top 3 list of new comics coming out next month that is worthy of any reader's attention. He puts a lot of time scouring, previews and solicitations to make this list. So let's not waste any more time. Let's go and cue up the music and see what he's picked out today. Ashley, for your I guess heads up or awareness, I did link this time. I'm going to start linking the comics in the show notes. So if you scroll down to my notes, go to Ben's picks, you can actually click in and see the title and all that. So, anyways,
okay.
All right. First up on Ben's list, I think he's appealing. Speaking about Image Comics, indie publishers, doing great things. Ben, go ahead. Without even knowing, I think the theme of today's show, the first comic on his list definitely applies to that. It's from Aftershock Comics. It's called Last Line Number 1. It's written by Richard Denick and art by Jose Holder. Ben, go ahead and tell us about this one right here.
Aftershock Comics Last Line #1. While researching this comic, it took me back to a photo I recently saw of Orion's Belt, the star system, laid out on top of an aerial photo of the Great Pyramids, and it was mathematically precise. Blew my mind. Left me thinking, what if those pyramids were some sort of star map? Well, this is how I know I live in the Matrix, because Richard Dinnick was thinking the same thing, and he's got a comic, What If London Underground Map of the Subway System is actually a star map of other planets? Alien invasions, X-Files vibes? Yup, this is an FOC pick for me. Last Line #1.
All right, once again, that was Last Line #1 by Richard Dinnick. Jose Holder, that is arriving in shops September 7th. The cover looks great. I don't know. Actually, were you able to pull up the cover at least? Oh, yeah. All right. The next title on Ben's list.
Yeah, no, this seems right up my
Ben's
alley.
got
I'm
this
kinda
theme,
excited about this.
where he is a 90s, he grew up and, was really big into 90s comics. And I think this next comic on his list, it's definitely for you 90 old heads out there. So, Ed, see? Oh. All right, this next one is Midnight Suns #1 from Image Comics. And it's not, it's not Midnight Suns like, the 90s series SONS. It's SUNS. It's Marvel's way of reusing some old idea and giving it a fresh coat of paint. But, Ben, how about you tell us about this one?
So this pick by Marvel Comics, Midnight Suns #1, new one of a 5-part series, originally attracted me to it because of 3 characters, Magic, Wolverine, Blade, plus, as an added bonus, David Nakayama cover art, which I'll collect no matter what. But I went into it, found a character named Nico Minoru, apparently from the Runaways crew. This is the best part about comics. There's so much that I don't even know. This character apparently went to this place called Father Flanagan's Home for Unwanted Goth Kids. I can't believe that's real. Marvel Comics continues to astound me. I must know more. I don't even care about Midnight Suns. I want to know about this Home for Unwanted Goth Kids. I may never stop talking about it.
Ben will, that's no hyperbole. Ben will never not stop talking about it. I'm probably going to go into the shop next week, and he's going to bring up this character that he found. Love the enthusiasm. Thank you so much, Ben. Once again, that comic book was Midnight Suns #1. All right. If you were a fan of Midnight Suns from the 90s, I mean, who wasn't? It was like Andy Kubert on the artwork. But a bunch of all the badass characters. They are relaunching it with this new series. It's going to be a 5-part series. It's arriving in shops on September 14th. Last but not least on Ben's top 3 list is coming from Dark Horse Comics. It's called Shock Shop #1. Ben, tell us about this one.
And finally, Dark Horse Comics, Shock Shop #1. What a great name of a new horror series. However, try saying that 5 times fast. I won't because I can't. I barely got it out once. Writer Cullen Bunn, who wrote Dark Ark, by the way, another fantastic horror series, is back with a new horror anthology that really gives me some of those Tales from the Crypt vibes as they tell stories from a haunted comic shop called Shock Shop. Speaking of Shock Shop, maybe that's what we'll call the limit around Halloween. Thanks for being here for our picks of the week, and remember, always take it to the limit.
Words to live by. Words to live by. All right, listeners, if you are a fan of scaring yourself shitless while reading your comic books or fan of EC comic books, once again, that title was Shock Shop #1, written by Colin Bunn, art by Danny Luckert. It's arriving in shops September 7th. Ashley, I do want you to take the challenge that Ben proposed. Can you say Shock Shop #1 5 times fast? Go.
Whoa.
Liquid Death.
Oh, my God.
I got me a cold one in the
not
fridge.
even
Good for the
try.
baby?
I've been drinking liquid
Oh,
death all
absolutely.
day.
That baby's going to be badass when it comes out.
With a metal arm like magic.
All right. Ashley, Ed,
Make 'em
of
strong.
the 3 options presented by Ben, which one is worthy of making it on your pull list? Ed, why you start us off?
Man, I like Midnight Sun and Shock Shop. Sound pretty cool. But Midnight Sun, it's, who's it, Magic, Wolverine, and Blade?
And some other characters that Ben is super hype about.
Yeah, but those 3 are cool. I don't know who this other jerk off is. But that's an interesting combination. And I do like, if Blade's involved, there would be some cool monsters in it, I'm sure. So I'm probably have to edge towards the Midnight Sun.
I felt a little bad at first for making the 90s old guy joke, prior to bringing that up, but now I'm like, oh yeah, Ben knew what he was doing. Marvel knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
All right, good stuff. Ashley, same question to you. Which one of these three piqued your interest? Yeah, I'm right there with you. Last line number one.
Definitely last line number one. I mean, he had me at X-Files vibes.
I think the solicitation mentioned something about like assassination, outer space vibes, thriller type thing, and I'm kind of in the mood for that. Aftershock's been killing it. As far as, we're talking about Image Comics kind of like, setting the foundation for, these other indie publishers. Aftershock has been killing it, so I'll check that out. But listeners, that is the list for today. If any of those pique your interest, I believe you have until Monday, August 15th before the final order cutoff date. So make sure you ask your local comic shops to order it for you. And a big shout out to Ben from Gotham City Limit for putting those on our radar. And he's always steering us in the right direction, so we thank him for that. And remember, the words that he gave us, even you can take it to the limit, even if you don't live in Jax, all right? You can shop their online store, which is linked in this episode's show notes, or you can shop their community marketplace on the Whatnot app. Next up, we're going to read some emails sent to us by listeners, and we'll be announcing a giveaway. Go ahead and hold this up to the camera for a brand new exclusive comic. Speaking about Gotham City Limit, once again, they got another variant, exclusive variant comic out. We'll be doing a giveaway for that.
Is that when Kyle Rayner becomes Green Lantern?
Yes, it is, which we heard all about, the last time that we recorded. But first, before we get before we get around to all of that, we're going to go on a quick music break. The man in large part responsible for a lot of the dope music that you hear on this show is Mecca the Marvelous, all right? And he's been busy this summer. He recently dropped a new project a new project on all streaming platforms. It's called Naraka. I'm going to go ahead and play the title track for you, and then we'll be right back, all right? So stay tuned.